All right, thanks a lot for coming, people. It's the last day of conference. I know you're all tired, but good to see you here still. My name is Nicky, and today I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the controversial topic, which is called DeFi, Reimagining Liquidity in a Frictionless Ecosystem when it comes to DeFi on Rollups. I mean, I guess you guys have all utilized at some point like rollups, try to use some strategies, like DeFi strategies on different rollups. My first question to you, who is a big fan of using bridges, intent networks, and who is constant user of those? Okay, one person in the room. I will talk about the experience and generally speaking, what's the setup in different ecosystems. So let's kick it off. So a little bit about rollups. So yes, when we're talking about rollups, we're talking about actual essential them scaling like Ethereum. They have basically, from one perspective, resolved the gas fees, but really did not resolve the liquidity silos. At least I do believe so, even though we do have some short solutions, but they're still not a fully resolving the liquidity fragmentation we have. So if you look, for example, at the numbers, we've seen that the TVL rebounded to 120 billion in January 2025, with about 13% already on rollups. The figures were taken from DeFi Llama. And then actually, if you look at current gas fees, or at the moment when I was doing this presentation, so the gas fees on Ethereum L1, they average about $10 per swap versus a $0.3 on major rollups. And then liquidity, however, is really increasingly fragmented across 24 rollups, which in fact affects the volume growth. And also, even though, for example, the swap costs or the transaction costs are very low, you still pay a gargantuan amount in bridging fees, and liquidity is still fractured, right? So whenever we want to actually move liquidity from one rollup to another rollup, and to make it attractive, we offer certain incentives. You see, actually, sometimes the liquidity leaving, let's say one chain and going to the other chain. And essentially, that mercenary capital flowing between different chains. And Rollups 101, this is, I'm sure you guys are familiar with all of it, but this is just to give you a little bit of an overview, what is there in the kind of ecosystem. We have optimistic rollups where you have 7-day challenge window. Then we have base rollups. This is where the sequencer inherits the decentralization of layer 1. And then we have, of course, the ZK EVM, which posts the proofs on EVM state. And then we, for example, have Stark and Alt VMs, which post Stark validity proof for Cairo and LLVM. And you can see the finality versus L1. And then you can see the current rollup landscape. So I have taken this actually table, this information from L2 Beats and the TVL from DeFi Llama. And also you can see the monthly transaction across rollups and average fees. And you can see, for example, which ones are leading in terms of TVL, which ones are leading in terms of monthly transactions. So the most transactions are happening on base, and which one have the lowest average fees. And what are the liquidity fragmentation costs, right? So essentially, what are we talking about here when we're talking about liquidity fragmentation? It's not just okay, we understand the issue and okay, let's leave it at that. But essentially, what you have in the end of the day, if I want to place a huge order, let's say on chain, currently it's really not that possible because let's say I place a huge order for a specific asset or something like that on one chain on a specific pool, it means that I will suck out the liquidity, and then essentially if my order is too big, I will encounter, for example, slippage. There's not enough of pool depths there. But also, if I want to go and do the same on the other chains, it means that I need to kind of bridge, move to those chains, which also introduces extra latency. And here we're encountering this bridging UX friction because we have delays, multiple approvals, and then we also have to at times deal with wrapped assets. And if you look at, generally speaking, at the setup, like 72% of blue chip pairs, they like exist on about like 5 L2s, but median depth per pool is 18% of mainnet depths. So it's really little, I would say. And then also if we look at the UX part of it, which is very important for the end users, when we're especially talking about the optimistic bridges, it's like a 7-day exit period. Users sometimes they do resort to third-party bridges, essentially myself included as well, which add additional fees on top. And I always like to say, I mean, and it might sound controversial, but you know, sometimes the centralized exchanges, they offer the best actual UX UI for bridging, unfortunately, currently. And we do have like capital inefficiency due to the fragmented liquidity because collateral, for example, if you look at the lending markets, is duplicated across the lending markets. And it's actually a very good study done by Gauntlet, so I would really recommend checking it out. And basically, like, but what we're striving to achieve in this like space, we really want to like get to the point where we will be able to unify that liquidity, right? So, for example, we've seen a lot of like, you know, solutions emerging when it comes to intent-based flows. So, for example, you as a user sign an order, and it kind of like the solvers they compete to execute this transaction for you. And then, for example, like sometimes we're talking about the atomic cross-rollup settlement. And here we can talk about like shared sequencers that lead to synchronous execution, but also like, for example, single canonical asset representation, which is very important as well. And then like, for example, we can also talk about synchronous composability, but this is very limited to the base rollup space, I would say, where you have multiple base rollups actually sharing the same L1 block. So you let essentially cross rollup calls execute atomically without actually needing an external sequencer, which is very important. And of course, like there's also part of the risk-taking security where you have bridges and routers like that. They borrow the ETH economic weight via eigenlayer AVS. Sorry. And what are the building blocks, right? So this is to give you a little bit of an overview. So you have cross-messaging, the likes of Layer 0, XLR, for example, Wormhole, Chainlink, CCIP, like if you're familiar with Layer 0, they have the OFT standard. When it comes to Wormhole, you have the entity, for example. In the case of XLR, if I'm not mistaken, they're pushing ATS. Then you have, for example, bridges, routers, and routers like across, hop, connect. And then you have, for example, shared sequencers like Espresso, Astria, and then like when we're talking about like risk-taking security, you have like eigenlayer extending ETH economic security to bridges and DA layers. And what are the standards that are currently emerging and that we see currently? So we have, for example, ERC 7683, which is like a cross-chain intents, powered by Uniswap Labs plus Across. Then you have like the superchain, which have like basically fungible tokens across OP stack rollups. And then you have like a Polygon ag layer, which basically what it does, it just takes the like, you know, proofs from different layers and aggregates them into one, creating this ZK aggregated settlement. And then basically you have UAT 20, which is actually a cool one, which basically like unifies all the balances across different rollups and chains. And then you have the XERC 20 or ERC 7281, which is basically was adopted by Maker, Teleport, and Go. And you can actually like find on the governance forum of Aave, if I'm not mistaken, there's actually like a discussion around it as well. And I mean, these are just a little bit of case studies, like which one does what. For example, like one of the very well-known, I would say it's Layer 0 OFT. So it's basically transformed into omni-chain fungible tokens, enabling seamless like migrations. And you actually have also that was XLR, ITS, and Wormhole entity, but I would say in this case, essentially Layer 0 is leading this game because they are the ones which are, I would say, most adopted. And of course, you also have like the other interesting case is the across layers, which allow like a kind of like peer-to-peer liquidity settlement across L2s, which is another cool case to look at. And what are the other aggregation frameworks do we have? Of course, in the space there are more probably, but these are the I would say, the most known ones. So we have, like, for example, Optimism Superchain, which is the optimistic stack. Then Polygon Aglayer, which basically, like, unites, takes all the proofs and aggregates them into one. The one which is oldest, I would say, Cosmos IBC, but still, like, they do provide parallel upgrade, which adds fast finality layer selection. And then you have basically like a base rollups working on the synchronous composability, which basically offer like no central sequencer with cross rollup atomicity, which makes it much easier. So, and when it, sorry. Right, so security and decentralization, right? So which is one of the key questions that we ask in this space. And we do have like a lot of like kind of different, I would say, points of view here. But of course, one key thing we have to take into the consideration in some cases, like the challenge period, then like bridge risks, which basically you're trusting essentially the external validator set as well. And you have this risk taking and pessimistic proofs which mitigate economic attacks. So, of course, here we can argue a lot, and different people have different views, but essentially, like, when we are actually, for example, using different solutions or different methods, there are security and actual decentralization assumptions around each of them. And what are the DeFi opportunities, right? Where do we want to get? Like, as a user, as a DeFi user myself, what do I want to achieve? So I want to have actually truly multi-chain execution layer. So I want to get actually this like deep, high liquidity pools with actual zero bridging and with minimal slippage. Like, for example, instead of like having bigger trades happening on the centralized venues, you want the people to come and actually place those large trades on chain. You want to have true cross-chain position. So you want to have, like, for example, unified multi-chain accounts, instant cross-chain liquidation, and you want to have like zero friction liquidity sourcing. Also, you want to have, for example, vaults that rebalance across rollups. You want to farm the highest returns possible. And when it comes to stablecoin, you want to have like this multi-chain borrowing, instant, unified deep liquidity across the pools, and borrowers get the assets exactly where they need. So they don't really need to care like, oh, okay, for this I need to go to this chain, or for example, to rebalance my position, I need to bridge there or whatever. They just want to like, you want to have this like a one-click transaction that makes it all happen for you. And what are the challenges currently and open research when it comes to that? So we do have, like, for example, certain open research going around the synchronous messaging and latency for consistency. We have like BitVM bridges, like, which promise ZK Lite clients. Also, for example, the other one is the universal proof verification, which is also interesting, verifying diverse ZK circuits on a one without forks. And also, like for AVS, staking derivatives and slashing design to avoid correlated failures. These are like some of the open research going on and some of the challenges. And key takeaways from this, actually, I would say presentation, what I would say, right? Like, this is my point of view again. So if we look at the space, I would say that yes, rollups, definitely they fix the liquidity, but unification might be the next unlock. So we're still not there where we can say, oh, okay, we're unifying liquidity, not just like across specific stack, like OP stack, base stack, or whatever, but across, generally speaking, all rollups. But still, even when we're talking about the unification of liquidity across rollups, we're missing one key factor. We're still not addressing the elephant in the room. We're not unifying all the chains, right? So, of course, if you're thinking that Ethereum is going to be the only chain and essentially there will be no other chain, yes, maybe the rollup unification, the like liquidity unification across rollups is something that we need to achieve. But I totally believe that we're going to be kind of living in the multi-chain world. So in the end of the day, we'll need to kind of understand how do we want to converge this liquidity across different chains. And then you, of course, have, for example, different standards. Like one of my favorites, like shared sequencing and the risk-taking are converging fast. So when it comes, for example, to shared sequencers, you have already the likes of Espresso and Austria, as mentioned, and they do certain work there. And in the end of the day, like what we also want to encourage builders that they should actually design for cross-rollup composability from day one. You don't want them to focus actually on designing for a specific chain or for a specific ecosystem. You want them to build solutions that will be multi-chain in a way, but not multi-chain the way we know it, right? So the multi-chain is for example, they're running on many chains or whatever, but as a user, I don't understand basically. I don't care about the chain that they're running on. I can just place, sure, go ahead. Oh, five minutes, okay. So, and then what I mentioned earlier, the atomicity on the chain level is missing. And essentially what that means, right? I can maybe on the rollup level, we will achieve it at certain point in time, but currently, for example, what I cannot do, I cannot hit one transaction which will be able to settle the trade across all the chains. Yes, there are I still need to rely on bridges. Yes, there are intent frameworks, but they are not solving it, well enough, I would say. They're still adding extra latency that if we're talking about high frequency traders or market makers, if we want to work with those guys, that's a blocker for them. And one key thing that I would like to mention, we're actually building it at Celerix. We're quite chain agnostic. We're not an interoperability protocol. We're more of an execution layer. So yeah, if you're interested to learn more about us, please check it out. So here's my Twitter, my TG, and the docs. Feel free to message me if you have any questions. And yeah, looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for coming, and it was awesome here chatting about the fragmented liquidity. Yeah. If anyone has questions, please do let me know. Sure, go ahead.
When do you see it happening, working seamlessly?
Working seamlessly, precisely with what we're building, latest Q3 2026. But for that, you have to check the documents. Basically, it will be covering all the different chains, different VMs, and essentially ensuring atomic transactions across different chains.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome, then thank you so much, and would like to thank also organizers for inviting me. It was awesome, and looking forward to the next ECC. Thank you, guys.